end of this video, you will learn everything about Disney's secret in-house formula for writing the perfect villain, and I guarantee that you are going to know it better than Disney does. Because despite the fact that Ursula fulfilled the steps in Disney's own villain Bible perfectly and took it to a whole new level with Poor Unfortunate Souls, Disney can't seem to remember their own golden standard for creating a compelling villain. We haven't gotten a true villain song in over a decade. Why is it that modern Disney can't replicate their past successes? And why can't we let it go? What is it about these villains that have stayed with us so deeply that we beg Disney to return to their roots so we can have more? Good day, everybody. It is Calxiyn here, ready to nerd out on Calxiyn Cares Too Much and make you care. As a professional musical theater performer and songwriter, I am going to go bar by bar to reveal why Ursula embodies every key storytelling lesson when it comes to writing villains. That way, you can do it too, or you can just feel smarter for knowing. Thank you to all the patrons and the YouTube members for supporting me this Calxiyn so I can teach you about all of these iconic villains. There is an important piece of Disney history that many people overlook or don't even register that I want to reveal to you guys before we can talk about the song. So riddle me this: which Disney villains have villain songs before Ursula? Because Disney movies have always had music, some people may not fully realize that even though we have had, say, diegetic pirate songs in Peter Pan or conman theater show tunes in Pinocchio, or even more traditional I Want songs like in Snow White, The Little Mermaid did something completely different. 99% of the time, the songs in these old movies are diegetic, whereas The Little Mermaid took a musical theater approach, and this changed how the music would be used going forward to breathe life into these stories. If you ask yourself what is the difference between characters like Ursula and our classic villain trio, you'll notice that they never got their own songs, and the reason why is crazy to me. Tell me whether or not you knew this. The evil queen almost got a song in Snow White, but they cut it because they couldn't figure out how to make her both menacing and musical at the same time. They thought she would be too goofy if she broke out in a song. One of the many key steps in the Disney villain Bible is balancing the need for villains to be sinister while retaining their human foibles and comedic touches to bring out their human side. So how is that humor and humanness portrayed differently between the classic trio and Ursula? Maleficent's humor, for example, comes from how she treats her minions, with, say, pretending to speak sweetly to them before completely flying off the handle, and that is what generates the laughs from the audience. The villains only get to be funny if they're operating at an emotional extreme that ends in some sort of evil action. And to me, some of her humanness comes from how she is genuinely exhausted at their incompetence, and that's a feeling that we can all relate to in some way. With Ursula, they were able to not only capture that and fulfill the first step in Disney's villain writing method, but they were able to elevate it and evolve it in a musical number. A song is the heart and soul of a character, so there's no quicker way to get to the root of a human, even an evil human. For the first time, singing was not just reserved for a diegetic circumstance or the goofy characters, or the heroic characters. A song could be both entertaining and also frightening. But how did this shift happen at Disney? Because if you're anything like me, I think that this is completely hilarious. Like, they were at the opposite end of this huge extreme. Like, a villain singing would be completely ridiculous. It's out of the question. Let's never do that. And then later down the line, we get one of the most serious, mature, and disturbing villain numbers in all of animation from Disney. There is actually an incredibly simple reason for this distinct divide, and this simple thing is what saved Disney from bankruptcy. Alan Menken and Howard Ashman wrote the music for The Little Mermaid, and Howard Ashman in particular was crucial in shaping the movie as a whole. But just hiring outside talent and calling it a day is not enough. I mean, I don't know if I would use the word talent and Wish as songwriters in the same sentence, but we see that with Wish that doesn't work. The reason why Howard Ashman and Alan Menken were able to change Disney as we know it is because both of them, but Howard Ashman especially, were not just songwriters who were called in after everything had already been decided. They weren't just held at a distance or locked in a dungeon like the songwriters for the recent Disney movies have been. Howard Ashman was a producer as well as the lyricist, and his philosophies on storytelling shaped the narrative because he was part of the narrative process. He held story meetings and he marked up scripts. In a medium like this, the songwriters are script writers because the songs are part of the script, not just a bonus feature. The songwriters were recognized as storytellers, and Howard Ashman's sense for storytelling impacted the movie significantly. When he was sent the script, he sent back meticulous notes and annotations that had musical, character, and even visual and dramatic suggestions. He was there in the booth directing the singers down to the finest detail, and he also helped to make other key decisions, such as refining Ariel's motivations and then also deciding that Sebastian should be Jamaican, so the music could have that type of sound. But how does this whole story impact Ursula? It's not only because Howard Ashman is the one who decided on her drag queen persona that we see in the film. If you watch the demos of Poor Unfortunate Souls, he embodied her. He was Ursula, and he recorded himself singing to convince Pat Carroll to take the role. She had even said that she borrowed some of the inflections and acting choices that Howard Ashman had made. There are a few documentaries and also behind-the-scenes videos from the Little Mermaid DVDs that I'd highly recommend watching because I just can't possibly capture this man's impact and legacy in just a couple minutes. But here's another key lesson. Howard Ashman teaches us how to be storytellers. You have to speak like your character, move like your character, think like your character, and in those recordings you watch as Howard Ashman melts away and Ursula is right there in front of you. You need to allow yourself to be transformed by your own work and freely play pretend. And another key lesson is going to be about mindset. The mindset of the storytellers back then compared to now differs in a huge way. I get chills every time I hear this, so here it is. Howard Ashman believed that animation could lend itself better to the medium of musical theater, better than even the stage could. And that is because of what animation allows to make possible. One of the reasons why Wish is such a disaster is because to make a musical, you need to earnestly believe that a musical is the best and only way a story can be told, and treat the songwriting as integral to the story because of that. One reason, among many reasons, that the Disney live-action remakes do not work is because it is a reflection of the fact that they do not earnestly believe that animation was the best way to tell that story. It makes me wonder if Disney has lost the plot, because doesn't a live-action remake spit in the face of that mentality that animation was the best and only way a story could be told? Back to old Disney though, the reason why they could not imagine the villain character singing is because they did not, in earnest, believe in the capacity for musical theater to be able to show wickedness. But the Little Mermaid's team did. And we must remember the animators here and everyone else who worked on this movie. That's another lesson. Theater is a team sport, and animation is the same way. As influential as Howard Ashman was, you can't attribute everything to just one individual. It was the marriage between animation and musical theater, and all of the people that it took to make that happen, that facilitated that made that synergy possible, that took Disney to its maximum potential in all areas. So you have all these amazing storytellers and songwriters creating this masterpiece together, but what are the technical elements that the storytellers use to captivate the audience? If I ended the video here, you guys wouldn't know how to be good storytellers yourself or what specific techniques they actually use in the Villain Bible. Starting at the beginning is always the best place to start. The villain's introduction is crucial, and as they say, first impressions are everything after all. So how does a villain make a lasting one on the audience? First, we have this striking visual of Ursula's henchmen, Flotsam and Jetsam, and their glowing eyes contrast the dark blue in this scene. The visual of Ariel is captured in this golden bubble first, foreshadowing the later scene with Ariel's transformation where she's in that same bubble, and that's before it becomes more like a traditional witchy crystal ball. This not only creates immediate visual interest, but it also signals a lot of information to the audience without words. We find out that Ursula is a witch, we know that there's magic, and we understand how the powers work in relation to Ursula and Flotsam and Jetsam. But it's not only the visuals here. Have you ever noticed that we get introduced to the poor unfortunate soul's leitmotif for the very first time in the background of the score? We also have a motif that is coined in sheet music as Ursula sound.
Yes, hurry home, princess.
There's a super important technique in musical theater called surprising yet familiar or inevitable, and this can take the narrative to a whole new level in a way that the audience may not even register, like it hooks us at a subconscious level. Alan Menken introduces this motif now as a way to convey Ursula in seconds. The music is foreboding and has this darkness, yet the rhythm also sounds very musical theater-y or vaudeville-esque, and so we know that Ursula is both evil but also theatrical. The Ursula sound is also creepy and villainous, yet a little playful. They say that Ursula's actual song is a 3-act seduction. You have the invitation, the seduction, and then the spell. But these scenes with Ursula also function that way, and it's just so smart. When we hear this now, that's the invitation to the audience to get to know this theme. Then we hear it again when we see Ursula the second time, and that is the seduction. That is when we start to be pulled into her and her evil plans. By the third time, when Poor Unfortunate Souls actually starts, she casts the spell. Not on Ariel yet, on us. By hearing this now, the familiarity is able to pull us in to the point where we are actively waiting for Ursula to sing the third time we see her. And then when she actually does, there's this burst of surprise because we don't actually know what she's going to say yet. You could also think of this as tension and release. A reoccurring leitmotif creates tension with the audience because we are waiting for when that leitmotif is actually used in a full musical number. And when that musical number happens, that's the release. The framing of Ursula in this scene also creates intrigue for the audience. Ursula is obscured in darkness while the whites of her eyes are glowing, and I've always heard that if you want to seem insane to the audience, especially as an actor, you should show the whites of your eyes, but it's not only that. Have you noticed that she's not just a pair of eyes, like you can see the outline of her body? It makes us lean in a little bit, like we gotta look closer because we can take a look if we look hard enough. And because we can't see her, we also have to lean in and listen carefully. I also can't overstate the brilliance of that scene where all we see is her nails and her mouth. It's just so iconic and brutal. All of this is punctuated by Ursula's performance here, but it's not only her way of speaking or her body language, it's also through what exactly she is talking about. Think about how the scene would be different if Ursula was just talking about murdering people or something, right? She doesn't reveal that evil too quickly. Instead, she's lamenting about the good old days, like we all do. She is bitter and jealous about the celebration at the palace and the fact that she is not invited. Another step to follow that the Villain Bible talks about is that part of the reason why we are so mesmerized by villains is because they have the same emotions that we do, but we must remain civilized and bottle up our jealousy or our greed or our need for power. Meanwhile, they get to do whatever they want. They get to be out of control. And in a sense, that means that they are more honest with their feelings than we are. That is why we are introduced to Ursula being spurned in a way that many of us have been. Everything in the narrative so far, including this monologue, is building tension in this scene, and then it gives us the reveal of Ursula in a fantastic way. Ursula is lamenting, "Look at me," to herself, but it seems directed at the audience as well, inviting us to look at Ursula. When we do see her come out of her little shell room, she's dramatic in her body language, but clearly also physically imposing, and after all that tension and suspense, we get the release to see who we are actually dealing with here. And I love how we are left with just the whites of her eyes and the tentacles before the scene goes to black, because if eyes are the window to the soul, when we finally make direct eye contact with Ursula, when she is up close and personal with us, it is when she reveals her evil plan to the audience. Also, musical shout out to the horror movie-like strings that are happening at the end of this sequence as well.
Flotsam, Jetsam! I want you to keep an extra close watch on this pretty little daughter of his. She may be the key to Triton's undoing.
reinforcing that yes, if you have found Ursula fun and entertaining, that's great, but don't be fooled, she is evil too. Not only does the scene completely hook the audience in all those little ways, but it also accomplishes something that is incredibly important for making sure the audience cares about the villain. Just being afraid of the villain or thinking that they're funny isn't enough. The audience needs to know something deeper. When we are writing a villain, we need to establish what they want, how they plan to achieve it, and why. The Villain Bible says, the personality quirks, how the villain views what he is doing, his ultimate goals, and how he reacts to others in the story will be the heart of the film. There must be no hint of remorse, no second thoughts. The villain is unquestioning in his drive to achieve his ends. Most often, they feel completely justified in what they are doing since they consider themselves to be the true victim of an unfair circumstance. They feel they should have had the power, the recognition, the prize that has somehow been given to someone else. This wrong must be corrected. And what do they do in this scene? They establish, as the book says, that Ursula is crass, jaded, hard, and always looking for an advantage, and we learn that she was banished by Triton, hence her current status quo. She sees Ariel as an opportunity to get to him, and the reason why is to get revenge and make Triton as powerless as he has made her now. Like, even in modern day terms, Ursula's introduction is like complaining to your dog about the party that you didn't get invited to and you can see all your other friends posting about on Instagram. We all bitch and complain. We don't have to be an octopus to do that or have felt this before. Ursula is the ugly side that all of us have. All of these elements are incredibly important for the Disney villain formula, but this next lesson is one of my own that I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention to. Have you ever been watching something and you're just sitting there like, why hasn't the villain tried to do this before? Like, isn't it just so convenient that they've been waiting around the time that the movie starts in order to do their evil deeds? That is something that just pulls me right out of the movie, and then I can't stop thinking about what could have possibly prevented them from doing whatever they are doing, because really, there's nothing. The audience will inevitably wonder why Ursula has not tried to get her revenge on Triton before this point, and if the reason was, like, bad or non-existent, like if the reason seemed contrived, that would harm her credibility as a threat. In the book, they say villains act while the hero reacts, and so we need to know why the villain hasn't acted this entire time. But the writing avoids this misstep through having this exposition. We understand that Triton is more powerful and that Ursula cannot face him directly without any bargaining chips. She will lose. She's already been banished and exiled after all, so clearly things aren't going really well for her right now. We can infer that she has considered using Triton's daughters in some way, which is why she's keeping an eye on Ariel and the palace in the first place, but Ariel's sisters probably stay very close to home. It's Ariel straying further and further out that makes the wheels in Ursula's head start turning. She may not know what Ariel wants yet, but clearly it's something that Triton isn't giving her, so Ursula knows she can already be the savior who provides it. Even if Ariel wasn't in love with Eric, other people go to Ursula for all sorts of things, and so Ursula knows eventually there will be a time when Ariel wants a mysterious something, as all young people do. And so if all of that is the invitation, the second scene is the seduction, and this solidifies why Ursula is a character that we are actively hoping and waiting for with bated breath to come back on screen. We hear a higher poor unfortunate soul's leitmotif with the strings as well as more Ursula sound.
Oh, no. I can't stand it. It's too easy. The child is in love with a human. And not just any human. A prince. Daddy'll love that.
If a musical theater song is representative of the character's core or their heart, you can see how the confidence is growing with this reoccurring leitmotif. Like, compared to how we saw it before, Ursula is becoming way more excited now because she has finally found the missing piece, what Ariel actually wants. This is the key to her victory.
King Triton's headstrong, lovesick girl would make a charming addition to my little garden.
And what makes the scene so delicious is how Ursula is almost prying right into the audience's mind. Like, think about what she says here. She is eating up the dramatic irony that has also dawned on us. She laughs sarcastically about how Trident will just love that, his youngest daughter falling in love with a human, knowing how much it'll enrage him and that the fallout will be inevitable. But as the Villain Bible says, we can't just have camp and humor. We need to punctuate that theatricality and Ursula relishing in this drama with evil. We need a little reminder that Ursula is still evil. And the evil is reinforced here by the creatures in her sea spider web, or sea garden. And this is good planting for later payoff about how exactly Ursula's contracts work. We are able to visually infer what happened to those people even before poor unfortunate souls, and this is important with the stuff that happens with Trident later on. Even though it is called her sea garden, the reason why I said sea web is because in the book they actually compare her to a spider waiting for something to be caught in her web, and I love that. But not only does this scene follow that rule, we go back to surprising yet inevitable again. And that's an important lesson for why these check-ins with Ursula never feel grueling or forced. We never know when Ursula is going to show up, and that's the surprise. But when she does, she foreshadows the inevitable train crash that we are all waiting for when it comes to Ariel being driven right into Ursula's arms and us being helpless to stop it. Just when Ariel sings her triumphant reprise of her I Want song, she shows up to remind you that there is danger lurking around every rock. And after this, we have at least 10 minutes of tension, and then also Under the Sea happens during this part, and that creates some great pacing. Under the Sea being so happy and upbeat may lull you into this false sense of security, but the Trident destruction scene and, of course, Ariel actually meeting Ursula happens right after, surprising you probably because you got lost in jamming with Sebastian, but also feeling inevitable, especially after we already saw Ursula twice. Basically, the bitch is always there. Which is our segue into Flotsam and Jetsam leading Ariel to Ursula, and also another step in the Bible. The villain acts, the hero reacts. Ursula has chosen her time to strike, and we see now how the 3-act structure I mentioned earlier with Ursula pays off. There is another reason why I think that showcasing the villain prior to them actually interacting with the hero is so important, and if stories don't do this, they run the risk of the audience getting frustrated with the hero. By having not one, but 2 different scenes with Ursula relishing in her own evil, we get to see Ursula with her mask off, as opposed to the persona that she puts on to manipulate Ariel. We don't want the audience to be screaming, "Can't you see how obviously evil she is, Ariel? Run away," right? We want them to understand why Ariel can't. Ursula has done a complete 180 now that we see her again. And this is something the Bible mentions as well, saying that Ursula can soothe, cajole, feign sympathy, and be helpful to Ariel. They describe Ursula as a salesperson who knows every angle to pursue in convincing Ariel. But there's another angle that I wish the book dug into more that I think is equally important. Ariel is our protagonist, but she is not the one that actually learns the lesson. The strongest theme in the movie is Trident needing to learn how to be a better father, especially in the absence of Ariel's mother. So it only makes sense that Ursula would do what? Be motherly! I wish the book discussed that more because it only makes sense to me that Ursula would use this to her advantage. This sentiment is still easily readable within the narrative. But here's a fun fact for you guys too. There is a cut verse where Ursula says, "Aren't you glad you brought your problems to a lady you can trust?" I just think that that's so interesting. This movie gets a lot of bad faith criticism in terms of, oh, Ariel changed herself for a man, but people don't realize that Trident and Sebastian are the men demanding Ariel to change, not Eric. Eric is the one who accepts her as her true self. And Ursula uses the fact that Ariel needs to be heard to masquerade as someone who can provide her with that motherly understanding. So instead of being annoyed at Ariel, what makes it so tragic is that we understand why Ariel would want to and ultimately does believe Ursula. All the other adults in her life have failed her, and now she's all alone. Ariel is not stupid. Ursula is smart enough to weaponize her longing for understanding against her and presents herself as the only person who can fulfill that need. It's also important to note that Ursula is supposed to be Ariel's aunt, and even though this being explicitly confirmed was cut, it's still canon, like in all the other versions of The Little Mermaid that have come out since. Disney has rectified that by making it more obvious, because they wanted people to come to that as a natural conclusion, and some people did, but not everyone did, right? You can still read that in the script, but they decided to make it more clear, and especially in the Broadway version, it's even more apparent. There's the subtext that Triton, her own brother, drove her away, and Ursula can convince Ariel that the same thing is happening to her. Like there's always a black sheep in the family, right? Ursula's the independent woman who has magic and means, and uses that to help people that have nowhere else to turn. They never understand people like us, but don't worry, I understand. Auntie Ursula is here. I'll teach you everything you need to know about love and men. And Ursula positions both of them as the underdogs. But so far throughout this video, I have only talked about things that are present in the scenes. I haven't talked about the musical number itself and how that evolved and elevated the Disney formula. So let's dive into the song. When it comes to crafting a musical theater masterpiece, the instrumentation must be so unique that when we hear it, even without the lyrics, we immediately associate it with Ursula over any other character in the movie and over any other Disney character, period. Before Ursula even starts singing, we get this iconic vamp with the piano and the strings, but also a string instrument holding a very high note and possibly a flute also being in there.
Can you do that?
My dear, sweet child. That's what I do. It's what I live for.
We also have suspicious brass instruments sounding off when Ursula is saying poor souls with no one else to turn to.
To help unfortunate merfolk like yourself. Poor souls with no one else to turn to.
The string being held like this gives it a strong sense of tension, like we are holding our breath. And the suspicious brass makes us feel like something isn't quite right with what Ursula is claiming. And obviously the soundscape is very Broadway and show tune number, but evil. Because of the surprising yet familiar rule, we are falling into the rhythm naturally since as the audience we have heard it twice before. When Ursula actually starts singing, we get the fun musical theater reactions in between her lines. Musical theater reactions, where the music is reacting directly to what the character is singing, is what makes theater music sound so distinct and takes it from just a genre of music, a sound, to a medium of storytelling. Musical theater as a genre is usually associated with jazz, or in terms of the compositions having a wide sweeping orchestral sound. Musical theater style is not only about the song having a dynamic arc, but including the character in the musical composition. Like, instead of just copying and pasting entire sections, the music is alive. It is changing, even on a very, minute level, to what the character is singing about. And you can incorporate that technique into any genre of music. We have the harpsichord doing the suspicious Ursula sound leitmotif, and then we also have an echo after witch.
I admit that in the past I've been a nasty. They weren't kidding when they called me, well, a witch. But you'll find
we also have this deceitful slide thing happening with the cello, clarinet, and horns underneath. You'll find that nowadays I've mended all my ways.
But you'll find that nowadays I've mended all my ways.
I can't really show you guys a lot of the sheet music, but for your own reference, it looks like this. We also have one of my favorite musical theater reactions with the church-like music on Repented.
Repented, seen the light and made a switch.
We also have the suspicious slide on True Yes, which tells us this is absolutely not true.
True yes.
This is how you make a musical theater song feel reactive and dynamic to the character who is singing and what they are singing about. When Ursula is saying she's been a nasty and a witch, we hear the witchy reactions. Whereas when Ursula is trying to claim that she's changed, we have some church music to represent the fact that she is trying to be manipulative, but ultimately the instruments do a slide to convey that this is not true. This is the type of consideration and care that needs to be put into writing a song for musical theater. A song is the manifestation of a character's soul, and even though a character can lie in the lyrics, the music can't. So having these reactions contrast the manipulation with the truth. In terms of our structure here, this is excellent. This is exactly what I want to see instead of whatever Wish does where every verse is radically different beyond justification. One of those classic songwriting rules is that if you have multiple verses, they should be very close, if not identical, to each other. If they have the same function, they should take the same form. This allows the audience to snap into the song and feel secure, since we're establishing a pattern and repeating that pattern in a familiar way, but now with new verbal information. Typically, the verses provide exposition or foundational information while the chorus talks about the dream and the emotion, so to speak. And this is exactly where all this is going, and so that's another lesson for you all. If you want to do something different, you must make something different, and usually that is the pre-chorus or the chorus. But if both parts are doing the same thing, and the audience just got here, it is to your benefit and the audience's benefit to make sure that these things are the same. The new element will come in when the music has different reactions in verse 2, and of course in the new information that Ursula is providing. Moving on to satisfying sounds, we have weren't, when, well, and which. We also have some kidding and called. But what I actually find more interesting here is our back-end alliteration with the admit, that, the, past, nasty. This helps to give the song a nice flow, make it more memorable to us as the audience, and also, it's just fun to sing. Imagine if this line was something like, fine, you got me, in the past I was a nasty, or something like that. That just doesn't sound good anymore. If you're a songwriter, or you're just unemployed like I am, a fun exercise to do is changing out the words of a song with words that hold the same meaning or as similar as you can find, but just aren't very effective. That way you can see how it fucks up the effect. Something else that this hammers into the reader is how the audience gets hypnotized by the villain and how to make it so the audience is full of fear but can't look away. And in terms of our lyrics here, this creates a crispy and twisty feeling that has us mesmerized by Ursula's way of speaking. Ursula is weaving a story here that is making us lean in with intrigue and excitement at how she is going to pull all of this off. In terms of our rhymes, past and nast of nasty shares a nice little internal rhyme, even though it's not a perfect rhyme, but it's just here to provide the line some flow as opposed to being a rhyme. And that's the same with mended and repented. It's a soft rhyme just to please our ears, and I think that that's so satisfying. Then we have nowadays and ways, and something very important is that you want your external rhymes to have the same stress unless you're trying to make some sort of point. You don't want nowadays and way, because then that sounds jarring. You want nowadays and ways. That way it sounds crisp, clear, and satisfying to the audience. And of course, which and switch is especially nice because of how connected they are in terms of lyrical meaning. She made the switch from being a witch to now helping people out of the goodness of her heart. And that brings us to the lyrics and the characterization. Ursula is a witch, so another songwriting trick in the realm of content dictates form, form follows function, though this is a bit more abstract, is that if your character is blank or doing blank, the song should also be blank. So for example, if a character is singing a lullaby, the song should take the form of a conventional lullaby. When we have a character who is a witch, we are expecting all your double toil and trouble type tricky ways of speaking. Ursula is casting a spell on us with her song. And I love the double meaning of witch here. If you didn't know, she's subbing that in for bitch. And this is so microscopic in the grand scheme of things, but I just love how she says mended, as opposed to repaired or fixed. Mended just sounds so motherly, like your grandma sewing up a hole in a sweater for you. I also really like you'll find because Ursula is already presuming that Ariel will find out from her own experience, because Ariel will take the deal. It's you'll find today as we make this deal together personally. These little things can really help enhance your storytelling, and this isn't something that you should stress about in your first draft, but this is more to consider as you are revising your work. Even if you're not writing a song and you're writing a story or a fan fiction, it's always worth trying to be like Howard Ashman and embody the character in all ways, thinking about how they would speak and what words that they would use. And repented, seen the light, and made a switch have a really good rule of 3 element to them that builds on the idea of the lie. Sometimes when people make lists, they can accidentally include redundant lyrics. They think they're listing off 3 different things, but it is basically saying the same thing 3 times. However, we totally avoid that here. Ursula repented, but repented doesn't mean that she would continue to do magic. Instead, she repented, then saw the light, right? As opposed to never doing magic again. She saw the light, she saw that she should be good, and then she made the switch. She decided that now I'm still gonna do magic, but I'm going to do it to help people. She repented, she saw the light, she had her come to Jesus moment, and because of that, she decided to put her days of being bad behind her, but still continue to use her magic. And what's great about this in terms of the storytelling here is that Ursula is smart enough not to lie. For example, think of the difference between you saying, I didn't break the vase, Mom, it must have been somebody else, even though nobody else is home, as opposed to, Mom, I was cleaning the kitchen and I accidentally knocked over the vase. I'm so sorry. We are more willing to believe and trust people if it seems as though they are offering us the truth and admitting their mistakes. And Ariel already knows that Ursula is the sea witch, and so lying is a really bad idea. What's so great about this is that Ursula knows if she denies her past that Ariel could call her out on it, and that harms Ursula's credibility and sales pitch. But Ursula admitting her past to Ariel will make Ariel be like, oh yeah, I did hear that Ursula was the sea witch, but now she's saying she's changed? Like, that's interesting. Of course, you can have a character lie, and deny as much as you want them to, but this is more compelling to us as the audience in a situation where, again, we don't want the audience to be frustrated by Ariel. The villain is only as compelling as their hero, and so if you made Ursula outright lie and Ariel just believe it, she would seem stupid and we would get annoyed. But as the villain Bible says, part of the reason why we are so concerned for Ariel, the reason why we feel like she is in genuine danger, is because Ursula is so good at spinning the story. You are not better than Ariel. It would happen to you too. Ursula knows that Ariel feels like an outcast, and so that Ariel may be willing to give her some benefit of the doubt, especially considering what her father and Sebastian have said, right? Like, they already have flawed, wrong opinions about humans. So Ariel might be thinking, if they're wrong about that, what stops them from being wrong about Ursula? What they said about Ursula may not be true either. Ariel knows what it's like to be misjudged and have seen Sebastian and Triton misjudge others, and so Ursula is playing into that rather than just denying everything. Just a strong, independent woman who got a bad reputation, am I right? We all know how King Triton treats women like that, don't we? So that's how verse 1 invites us into this critical moment of the story. But how does verse 2 continue to keep us hooked? How does it lull the audience into a sense of security so they can follow along and enjoy the story, while making sure to stay fresh since we did already hear a verse before and this is the same thing? The brass is going a little bit harder than it was before, and in combination with all the magical sound effects, we also have the flutes and the higher instruments doing the little Ursula sound, and then trilling.
And I fortunately knew a little magic. It's a talent that I always have possessed.
Typically, we associate woodwind-type instruments with fairies, magic, and nature, and so these instruments are coded as folky or magical to us. By having the verses share similar structure, they get to be consistent, but what makes it dynamic and unique is by having different instruments reacting to the character's new exposition.
I admit that in the past I've been a nasty. They weren't kidding when they called me, well, a witch. But you'll find, and I fortunately knew a little magic. It's a talent that I always have possessed.
For example, the reason why the horns and the strings are really sounding off here is because we no longer have Ursula pretending to be a saint anymore. Before we had the saintly instruments, but now she is talking about what she actually does, and therefore her malicious intent is a bit more prominent compared to before. There's a similar slide on Lately Please Don't Laugh, I Use It On Behalf like there was before, but it's using a different instrument now.
Dear Lately Please Don't Laugh, I use it on behalf of, but you'll find that nowadays I've mended all my ways. Dear Lately Please Don't Laugh, I use it on behalf of,
and Miserable, Lonely, and Depressed also has a completely different reaction now compared to what we heard before.
Of the miserable, lonely, and depressed. Pathetic.
satisfying sounds, we have talent, that, back to back, and also lately, laugh, front to front. I think we're also trying to work with more vowels than we were before. While the first verse was very sharp in terms of our language, we have fortunately, no, magic, always, possessed. I don't really have a word for this, and I wouldn't say that it's intentional, like it's more of an instinct. And this may be like a cornplate tweet-ass thing to say, but I just think that there's something very interesting in keeping the singer's mouth shape that way. When you have that sort of circle shape, it's more almost classical and refined, whereas with past, nast, it is going to be a little nasal no matter how you slice it. Moving on to rhymes, the rhymes are in the same place as they were in the first verse, which is in fact the bare minimum, but Wish couldn't seem to figure it out, so let's celebrate that for now. We have possessed and depressed being a perfect rhyme, as well as laugh and behalf. And this is another songwriting trick for all of you. I had a professor who swore by the audience liking to predict what lyrics will come next, and then that giving them a dopamine hit. We are already predicting that these rhymes are coming because we heard this format before. And so now the audience tries to guess what is coming next, even if they're doing it subconsciously. Another incredibly important songwriting trick that verse 1 and verse 2 showcase here is making sure that your songs sound like speech, which is something that Sondheim heavily believed. All of these word choices are in character for Ursula, as I mentioned before, and that contributes to the song sounding like speech. We have language that feels conversational, yet still paints a picture for us, and it doesn't feel like the rhyming is overdone or forced at all. Like, you could monologue this, and I think that it would sound perfectly normal, which is usually the marker of a well-crafted song if natural is what you're going for. And when it comes to the characterization of Ursula here, I once again want to point out the themes of the movie and how she's selling herself to Ariel here. Ariel feels like an outcast. Her father tells her that humans are monsters. In our society, witches were also ostracized, persecuted, and said to be monsters. Ursula knows a little magic, and she's using it, she claims, to help people. Not only that, but it's a talent that she was born with. Ursula was born different. Unlike Triton, who has a magical object that was given to him, and he is useless without it. How interesting. And this is on top of the idea that Ursula uses her power to help people, whereas Triton only uses his power to destroy things, as we saw 5 minutes ago. And I am not slandering Triton or anything, but when I say these things, I'm trying to consider the story from Ariel and Ursula's point of view. It is no mistake in my mind that Ariel has bright young women sick of swimming, ready to stand, and the lines with Ariel lamenting that her father would never understand her feelings. Betcha on land they'd understand, bet they don't reprimand their daughters, right? And then you have a character like Ursula, who is exactly that. Of course, Ursula admits that she used to be a nasty, but it's interesting that Ursula prefaces what she's saying with, hey, please don't laugh, I use it on behalf of the miserable, lonely, and depressed. Why would she say, please don't laugh? Why would Ariel laugh? Is it because Ariel is laughing in disbelief, like, oh, sure, lady? Or is it because Ursula is trying to imply that she has been laughed at in the past before, that she has been judged with what she has been born as? Maybe she only did bad things because helping people was lauded as being a laughable idea by someone in the past. Just like how Ariel has a natural fascination with humans that is outlawed, you could imagine that Ursula is trying to paint herself as the victim a little bit here. It makes you wonder because Triton isn't granting wishes for people, and so was there a point in their shared history where Ursula did want to do good? Like, obviously not. No. But Ursula could say that she tried to, but she was laughed at, right? Triton laughed her out of the palace or something like that. We just won't know for sure how much of this is true. But what's important is that these two verses build up the past that Ursula wants Ariel to know. And because of the magic that we're seeing now, we're also getting more visual interest as well. But the chorus is the core of the song. It's where the thesis of the song lives and is really going to be presented. If Ariel was already convinced, we wouldn't need a chorus. We wouldn't need the song. The song would just be over. So what is happening with the tactic change now? The instrumentation here has the sort of Broadway shimmy me feeling, and Ursula even does that at one point. It's really funny. But we also have the brass and the wind instruments with another slide at in need.
Poor unfortunate souls in pain, in need.
Remember how I talked about that slide from earlier? This now happens again with the cello and the strings, where we're sliding downwards and it's happening in between like the bass hand that's keeping the rhythm.
This one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl. This one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl.
There's actually a tutti marking in the sheet music. I'm Italian, that's my best Italian accent, and basically this means that the whole orchestra comes together on a certain part. We also have some sort of shaky instruments in here, and then all of the instruments come together on yes indeed.
This one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl, and do I help them? Yes, indeed.
When we start Those Poor Unfortunate Souls, we have this spiraling downward feeling as the musical reactions get more intense. They feel corky is the best way that I can describe them. We also have more brass and woodwinds here that are in line with Ursula's melody, but also adding their own thing a little bit.
Those poor unfortunate souls, so sad, so true.
And we have two more musical reactions right here.
They come flocking to my cauldron crying, spells, Ursula, please, and I help them. Yes, I do.
Since we've shifted from a verse to a chorus, we now have a different structure, and you want a radically different structure than what your verses had, so the audience now knows, oh, we were secure in this thing, but now we get the surprise. This is different, and now they are prepared for a new thing. In terms of our satisfying sounds, though, this time we do have Get the Girl, cauldrons, crying, and then a sort of back-end thing with spells, Ursula, please, right? Like having that slithering sound, but this time I'm more focused on like the repetition as opposed to the twisty sounds. Like what I think is so interesting is this repetition of in pain, in need, so sad, so true, right? This one, that one. And we also have reinforcing that Ursula helps them twice. This is confirming that Ursula can help them, whereas this one is confirming how she will help them with spells. Repetition is a very important element of human storytelling, and it also lends itself well to giving Ursula some dramatic acting choices because it's like, so sad, so true. But basically, the reason why a lot of fairy tales have things that come in threes is because 3 is the most of something that indicates some sort of pattern, and it's easier to remember, and it makes an impact on you. So it's like, it's building a staircase, right? And of course, we're still coming back to this later, so even though we only have 2 now, we get a complete set by the time the song ends, and we can see how the language changes from these courses to the last one. In terms of rhymes, we have need, indeed, true, do. And I feel like what this does so well is that with the repetition combined with the rhymes being very far apart from each other, basically what we have is something that builds tension until the rhyme is reached. The rhyme being so far apart from the release makes Ursula going, this one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl, and do I help them? Right? And then we're waiting, it's suspended, it's tense. Yes, indeed. And I think it's so smart that they did it this way, because think about it. It mimics how someone would feel going to Ursula. There's this long tension and explanation of the problem, and then Ursula granting the solution, until finally they agree and she grants their wish. The satisfaction of the rhyme is representing somebody's spell being granted. This line is also very close to, if you want to cross a bridge, my sweet, you've got to pay the toll, which I don't think is a coincidence because it's the same thing. It's the same tension building thing. The story being told here is ultimately the same one that Ariel will go through herself. And this sort of stuff, guys, this is why I make these videos. This stuff makes me insane. In terms of characterization and the scene itself, we have some great visuals here with the cauldron, showing Ariel the route that others have taken to be happy. And what's really interesting is that usually villains are associated with green, and we see that later when Ursula reveals her true colors, so to speak, right? But here, it's pink, it's soft, it's gentle, it's almost like Ursula is playing Cupid or Aphrodite. Then we get this fantastic foreshadowing with Sebastian and Flounder swimming over the garden, perfectly timed with they come flocking to my cauldron crying spells, Ursula, please. So we understand what happened to the people who did what? Flocked to the cauldron and got a spell. And this is how everyone works together to tell a compelling story. It's not just about the songwriters, it's everyone who made this shot. And lyrically, this is interesting to me because do you guys think that Ursula is being vain, or that this is a commentary more so on the people who come to her being vain? Like, this man didn't wish for a personality, he wished to get buff, you know what I mean? Like, she says that this is what they desired. On the other hand, Ursula does tell Ariel the only way to get what she wants is to become human. And so it's possible that Ursula does tell all her clients what she thinks that they should do. But I think with Ariel, the reason why she says this is because Ariel didn't know that this was possible. She didn't know that she wanted to be human until Ursula suggested it. Whereas this guy that wants to get the girl, like, I feel like that he had things in mind. I don't know. At least the one that was longing to be thinner definitely did. Like, that's a pretty open and shut case, you know what I mean? It seems like that's what she wanted. It could also be Ursula trying to plant the idea in Ariel's mind that she could do a body transformation and like, oh, it went so well for other people. Look at these two, right? Like, Ursula would not pull the person out who wanted to be like, I don't know, an expert musician or something. Like, that's not really relevant, right? She's using a romantic example because Ariel is after romance. Ultimately, we don't really know. It's not like we can ask these characters, right? But from Ursula's point of view, I do wonder if she's trying to make these poor unfortunate souls seem a little shallow or maybe even selfish. She's like, listen, dear, they come crying to my cauldron for spells, like not even a specific spell, so don't blame me when in 5 seconds I say I rake them across the coals. Maybe it's to showcase that despite how shallow and selfish these people are, Ursula thinks that they're kind of sad and desperate, so she helps them anyway. Maybe it's to say, but Ariel, you're different. You're not like them. You have an earnest intention, you see? But nonetheless, it's an interesting detail that I think makes Ursula a bit more sympathetic, or at least she's trying to, right? Like, they come flocking to her cauldron, crying at her to use the spell, any spell, and they don't even care. Like, that inherently sounds overwhelming, and she helps them anyway. It's tricky language, and I could sit here all day and pick out how every little word contributes to the idea that Ursula is trying to make herself seem benevolent. But the key lesson here, at the very least, is the one that we mentioned earlier about villains. What do villains always try to do? They think that they are justified, and so of course they will try to paint themselves as the victim. You may be asking yourself, Cal, that's not a verse, it's not a pre-chorus, and it's not a chorus, but it's also not the bridge because the bridge comes later. So what is this? And to be honest, I don't know, right? Okay? Musical theater does not always follow pop music structure. Like, we don't have that verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, double chorus ending or whatever, right? And so we just have a nice little surprise. I'm calling this in my personal notes the tension building hold. We have full-on strings here, which is great for the idea of tension and suspense.
Now it's happened once or twice. Someone couldn't pay the price.
Then we hear the Ursula sound coming in after rake them cross the coals.
And I'm afraid I had to rake 'em across the coals.
And this is also where we get another one of my favorite musical reactions with, but on the whole, I've been a saint.
Yes, I've had the odd complaint, but on the whole, I've been a saint. To those poor unfortunate souls.
And in the sheet music, we have railroad tracks, which if you guys don't know, that means that everything stops and we wait for the singer to restart when they feel like it. And I love whenever this is used because if a song is a manifestation of a character's soul and it comes directly from them, the music is like too intimidated to continue without Ursula or like waiting for her cue. And I think that that's just so fantastic. Like if the music comes from her, it's only gonna start up again when she says so. And the strings and the brass coming in immediately is another signal that Ursula is lying. And in terms of the structure here, this can be whatever it wants because this is a new thing. This is Ursula introducing something that she hasn't up until now, what the consequences are for the people that don't want to pay the price after she's given them what they want. What I do like is in terms of an acting choice, and I'm afraid I had to rake them cross the coals, is held just like a little bit longer than the other ones, and that gives it the suspension and tension. In terms of satisfying sounds, we have pay, price, afraid, rake, cross, coals, complained. And in terms of our rhymes, we have also changed our rhyme structure here. And this is something that you want to do when you are creating, again, a new part, no matter what that is. You usually want not only the meter in terms of like, syllable counts, meter, all of that stuff, to be different than what it was before. You also want a different rhyme scheme. And so look at this, right? And how few rhymes we have and how all of these syllables differ yet still match with each other, right? And then look at this. Like, this is something that is completely different, and that's great. We have heard this phrase now 3 times, but when we hear it this time, it gets the rhyme. Why? Because we're finally finding out what happened to those poor unfortunate souls. Like, the reason why it never gets a rhyme before is because that wasn't the end of the story when we heard it those other 2 times. This is the end of the story. What happened to them? They got raked across the coals. No one has escaped, okay? This has not only happened once or twice, it happens every single time. This is the inevitable outcome, and so this is why this is the only rhyme that we get until later. And this is so interesting because I thought to myself, why is Ursula so willing to give up this information? And like, yes, as we talked about earlier, Ursula does want to be honest. She wants to give a little bit of truth, but I don't think that that's all. It's the way that it's framed that I think is so hilarious, because it's like, after all I did for you guys, you couldn't pay me? That's not fair. And I think a big part of why Ursula says this is because of the fairness. Like, it's almost like another sympathy grab. Like, Ariel, you wouldn't cheat me and use my good nature like those other people did you? And what's crazy about this is that the villain Bible does say something about this, but it's in relation to the hero. They say that the easiest way for the audience to sympathize with the hero is by having something happen that sets off our most basic sense of right and wrong. Like something that children will look at and go, hey, that's not fair. So isn't it just really funny that in this case it's Ursula, right? Like, it's what happened to Ursula isn't fair. It's not fair that she did so much for these people and no one could pay her. You won't be like that, right, Ariel? I love that this is usually something that writers do to make their heroes more sympathetic to the audience, but now Ursula is doing that same thing as a villain to be sympathetic to the hero. Like, it's a really nice oomph sort of moment when you realize that. And maybe we even realize that it's not fair. Like, it's not just Ariel getting manipulated. Maybe we're also like, wait a minute, like, people deserve to get paid. What's going on here? And then we're like, okay, well, wait a minute, she's evil, she's evil. Like, you have to remind yourself that she is evil, even though she's talking about being fairly compensated. That's the difference between characters like the evil queen and Ursula. Like, yes, as the villain book says, all of us will find like a little bit of a nugget in a villain that is too close to home for us. Like, maybe we have been jealous like the evil queen has been. But the evil queen, despite feeling wronged, never tries to bring up a valid case for why. Whereas with Ursula, not being paid fairly for your work is something that we can all relate to. Ursula is not only representing the feelings that are dormant inside of us, but we're also like, well, wait a minute, we felt that way, so doesn't Ursula have a point? Like, it's a little too close, and I think that that's fantastic. And this is where we get into the speaking section that introduces the price. And usually I don't get too in the weeds about scores during the speaking sections when we're talking about other songs, but this one actually does have some interesting reactions. And it showcases how the score and the song wasn't made in like some vacuum, right? They were made to be harmonious with each other. Something that Disney started to do during the Renaissance was having music slowly come in or stay playing so it didn't feel as jarring to switch between a song and speech. And yes, sometimes songs still like burst out of nowhere, right? And that's okay. It's okay for that to happen sometimes. But usually the music starts under some dialogue, so it's not like, why are they singing? What is going on? We have this magic and allure as Ursula is talking about making Ariel a human permanently. And then, as she is explaining what happens if Ariel doesn't get the kiss, there's this like hold of tension with the strings and everything goes silent. Also, the visuals in this scene are just fantastic. Like, this is the definition of using animation as a medium to bring the characters to life in a way that the stage just cannot. And all of the lighting and just like the shot composition, it makes me crazy. So we have something here that I am calling a verse expansion. Like, clearly this shares DNA with the verses verses that we heard before, but they're a little different. Like, the men up there don't like a lot of blabber compared to I admit that in the past I've been a nasty are very similar, I think, if not identical. There is a key change, but they're still like, they share the same interval relationship with each other. But now Ursula is going beyond what we heard before, and so we get a slightly different structure. If you compare the verses that we had before to this, you'll notice that the rhymes are roughly in the same place, and there's still the same intention in some areas, like we have a long short right here, and then in this we also have long short. But the reason why we're evolving this structure now is because the tactics have changed. We're not talking about Ursula anymore, we're talking about humans. If your character's approach isn't working, why would they keep doing the same thing? This is an important thing for storytelling, but also songwriting as well, you guys, and that's why some songs can fall apart after the course if the songwriters aren't careful. If we hear everything the song has to offer in the first minute and a half, why would we stay? Wish has this problem where nothing goes anywhere, and you do not want your audience to think, oh, the song could have ended here and nothing of value will be lost. We still want value, and because the character hasn't gotten what they want yet, they need to keep fighting. So the reason why Ursula continues in a new way instead of just repeating the same things we heard before is because why would Ursula go back to talking about herself? Like, that's not working. That's not the problem anymore. Now the problem is Ariel's hang up on giving up her voice. It sounds more intense now with these changes, and Ursula is becoming a little desperate. Like, she thought she would have convinced Ariel by now, but she hasn't. She needs to try other tactics to convince Ariel, and this evolution is a representation of that. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't remember when they are criticizing the movie, right? Ariel didn't consider becoming human until she got to Ursula's lair. She actually says that she will swim to Eric's castle as she is and introduce herself. Changing herself for a man was not even on the table. So Ariel is probably thinking, hey, if I don't have my voice, never mind. I'll just do it my way. I'm gonna do it the way that I already planned before. I won't lose anything. But now Ursula has to be like, no. Don't leave. You can't do it your way. Your way is not going to work. You will fail. The men up there don't like a lot of blabber, actually. You don't need your voice. Trust me. You need the legs more than you need the voice. You won't be able to be together without the legs. And the instrumentation here is very similar to what it was before, but now it's ramped up to like 11.
You'll have your looks, your pretty face, and don't underestimate the importance of body language.
We hear the harpsichord reaction when she says the men up there don't like a lot of blabber, and the same thing happens after bore.
The men up there don't like a lot of blabber. They think a girl who gossips is a bore. Yeah.
And this is so cool, because before we only heard these instruments when Ursula was trying to pretend to be saintly. And so now we understand, like, the reason why they're coming back is because she's saying all this, and she's lying, but she's saying all this under the guise of motherly advice. You don't know anything, sweetie. I'll tell you how the world is. I'll tell you how men are. Where we differ is with the reaction happening collecting all the instruments together on Idle Prattle 4.
Yes, on land it's much preferred for ladies not to say a word, and after all, dear, what is Idle Prattle for? Come on, then!
And this is where you can tell that Ursula is starting to get more frustrated and pushy. There's also this more unhinged spiraling with the instruments as Ursula goes into the next part of the expansion. We also have the Ursula sound after conversation, and then we also have a different one around can.
Not all that impressed with conversation. True gentlemen avoid it when they can. Not all that impressed with conversation. True gentlemen avoid it when they can.
All of this makes Ursula more villainous and intimidating. But what's also interesting is that Eric plays the flute, and that's who she's talking about here, like around can, right? And so I wonder if that was intentional. I mean, we have other instruments earlier that are woodwinds, so I don't know, maybe not, but maybe it was, and I think that it's neat. Previously, I mentioned that we have these descending downwards notes with the strings sometimes, but now they have a funky little trill under fawn and drawn. And you can also hear the strings going ham on It's She Who Holds Her Tongue Who Gets the Man.
But they dote and swoon and fawn on a lady who's withdrawn. It's she who holds her tongue who gets a man. Come on!
It's just so genius to have something that is similar to what we heard before, but then add in all these elements that give the sense of urgency and threat. In terms of satisfying sounds, we have like, lot, girl, gossips, and what makes this so great as well is that like a lot, girl who gossips, like the girl gossips like lot is on the stress, and so that's even more satisfying. Then of course we have blabber, bore, and then that feeling connected to each other since they happen like one line apart. It's the blabbering that bores the men. And then we have a similar vibe with land and ladies, like the part that is stressed, in this case the land, and the ladies is roughly in the same position. These serve as anchor points for us as the audience because it gives us a sense of familiarity when we replay the song in our heads or, you know, on the radio or whatever, and it makes it more memorable. When we sing Yes on Land It's Much Preferred, we remember that ladies is coming because they made that connection in our minds. And similar to how verse 2 was originally, in the verse 2 expansion, we don't have any apparent satisfying sounds. We're dealing more with vowels. We have dote, swoon, fawn, who, whose. And I feel like the vowel shape is, again, more refined, less sharp, and so it's suited for this section, even though, again, maybe this is a cornplate tweet, who knows, but the fact that it happens twice, right, in the same position, like if it was just a coincidence, this could have been full of alliteration, and then the other verse could have been the outlier, but no, we have a lot, and then we have vowels, and then we have a lot, and then we have vowels, you know what I mean? In terms of rhymes, bore and for is great, and I love preferred and word. Again, these feel really connected, like they prefer you not to say a word. Then we have fawn and withdrawn, which is fantastic, and of course can and man just feels like such a bang onto that point. What's really fantastic about the visuals here is that Ursula is already getting everything ready for the spell. I think this is not only because she's confident that Ariel will take the deal, but also because she wants Ariel to feel like she can't say no, and Ursula's already halfway there. Have you guys ever been at one of those restaurants where they make your food in front of you? Like, say it's like a burrito place or like something like that, right? If you are watching them and you see in real time that they are getting your order wrong, but they already put like whatever it was in the burrito, you're kind of like, I don't really want that, but I won't say anything because it's too late, then they'll have to redo the entire thing, right? You don't want to be a bother, you don't want it to go to waste, and so you just watch there as the person that is making your food puts in like the wrong type of beans or something, like something completely different to what you wanted. I feel like that Ursula is trying to make Ariel feel exactly like that. Like she wants to pressure Ariel into not being able to say no because the process is already happening, like it would be rude. You're gonna say no after I wasted all my ingredients on you? Like, I'm gonna bill you for that, you know what I mean? And remember that Ursula does throw in a one might question your upbringing earlier, right? When she says that Ariel lurking in the doorway is rude. So it's either to make Ariel feel like that she can't be rude, she can't say no, or you could also see this as Ursula trying to entice Ariel with displays of magic. In terms of lyrical meaning, this is what people do not understand about this movie, and it drives me absolutely bonkers, okay? Ursula has unfortunately caught astray in the bad faith criticism about the Little Mermaid being sexist. And I think unfortunately, yes, it is her line that is the source of like, the Little Mermaid taught you that it's okay to change yourself and give up your voice for a man. But say it with me now, everyone. Ursula is lying. She is a bad person. When Ursula says that Ariel has her looks and her pretty face and her body language, it's supposed to convince Ariel to do what she wants. It's not because Ursula is a role model for women everywhere. Even though she is an icon, she is not a role model. Ariel explicitly said that she would swim up to Eric's castle and just talk to him, but Ursula is the one who has convinced her that that is not good enough. Thanks to Triton, Ariel doesn't know anything about the human world. And so Ursula is trying to tell her, like, oh, you were under the impression that humans think the voice is important? Like, no, you can't win over Eric that way. Let me tell you what men really look for in a woman. So one interpretation is that Ursula is lying. I have a slightly different one, though. I think that Ursula thinks that this is true. But here's the thing. Ursula thinking that this is true is not sexist, okay? Like, if she said, I think women should be seen and not heard, that would be a different story. But she's saying that this is what the men think. She never says that this is a good thing. She says this as if it's just a fact of life. And men who are like this do exist. They still exist today. You may even know one of them, right? And so this is not sexism against women. It's a generalization about men. They think that a girl who gossips is a bore. It's not Ursula saying that she thinks a girl who gossips is a bore. They dote and swoon and fawn on a lady who's withdrawn. She's not saying that she thinks that that's a good thing. Obviously, me, as Calxiyn underneath the Ursula outfit for this video, will tell you that you shouldn't be with a man like that, okay? If a man says that this is what he wants in a woman, it's time to run. Where is the red flag guy from TikTok, right? But Eric isn't like that anyway. So Ursula is not saying anything about how a woman should be like. She's either lying about what men on the surface are like, or she's telling the truth based on, I don't know, her personal experiences or biases or something. She thinks that it's true anyway, and it's just wrong when applied to Eric. I am going to make a whole video defending Eric soon, so if you want to subscribe for that, or you just enjoyed this video so far, I encourage you to do so, because I'm really excited about it. But in my Eric Defense Squad manner, I will say that Eric would be excited about what Ariel has to say, because that's the type of guy that he is. He loves to hear about adventure. He loves the sea. He would want to hear more than Ariel's lovely singing voice. He would want to hear her thoughts and her opinions and her stories. What Ursula was not expecting to happen was that Eric would fall in love with Ariel for her heart and understand her without her voice. Obviously, Eric is fixated on finding the girl at the beginning, but what he really fell in love with was Ariel's personality, and that's shown through his arc. He does not want to find the girl who rescued him because she has a beautiful voice. That's just the only thing that he can remember about her. It's Ariel's bravery that makes it a priority to find her. The reason why he falls in love with Ariel, despite thinking that Ariel is not the girl who rescued him, is because of her curious nature while going through town. Like the way that she appreciates every single little moment, the way that she doesn't take herself too seriously, and how she's playful, albeit by accident, right when she tries Grimsby's pipe. And most importantly, it's because she just treats him like anyone else and doesn't care that he's the prince. Even though Ursula is trying to gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss and whatever else, I feel like that people really miss the point of this. The whole point is that Ariel succeeds even though Ursula was setting her up to fail on purpose, causing Ursula to go up to the surface and manipulate Eric with magic. Ursula said all this because she wanted Ariel to give up her voice, fail at getting true love's kiss because there's nothing more to her, and then become trapped. But Ariel goes up on the surface and Ursula realizes, oh fuck, this is Ursula underestimating Ariel. And what's empowering about this is that Ariel is valued and appreciated for more than just her beautiful singing voice, which everyone has been talking about this entire movie, right? She is appreciated by Eric for more. He sees her for who she really is and nearly succeeds until Ursula plays dirty. Something else to consider is that Triton has not done us any favors in terms of putting ourselves in Ariel's fin right now. Think about everything that Ursula is saying, right? This is the type of person that Triton wanted Ariel to be this entire time. Triton does not want Ariel to be stubborn and opinionated and stand her ground. He wants her to be obedient and stop getting into trouble. He wants her to be withdrawn. He shuts her down when they argue. He wants her to hold her tongue. So if you are Ariel, your conclusion would be, on land, I would actually be happy. So happy that I wouldn't need words. She wouldn't need to hold her tongue because there wouldn't be any conflicts or arguments with anyone, especially with Eric. From Ariel's point of view, she only argues with her father because he can't understand her, and she thinks that she will fit in better on land. And obviously, when I say these things, I'm being the actor. I'm trying to think about what's going on in Ariel's mind. But to me, it's like, so either I can stay here and no one will listen to me when I use my voice, or I can go up on land without a voice and do all the things I wanted, which didn't even require a voice, like jumping, dancing, strolling down the street, being in the sun. The entire point of the movie that people misunderstand is that Sebastian and Triton do not listen to Ariel despite Ariel using her voice, while Eric comes to love her and understands how to listen to her without Ariel even having a voice. So from Ariel's point of view, she is not giving up her voice for a man as much as she will not have a voice either way. So what does it matter? She will not truly have a voice under the sea. And so the difference is not having a voice versus not having a voice. It is not having a metaphorical voice under the sea and being miserable compared to not literally having a voice on land, but being happy. You can interpret this in a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, the only reason why this works on Ariel, why Ursula can manipulate Ariel, is because Triton drove his daughter away in the first place and made her feel unheard. Yet parents never talk about that because acknowledging that that is the real theme of the movie would mean that they, as parents, have to acknowledge when they have wronged their own kids, because every parent will do so eventually. No parent is perfect, right? And it's much easier to say, oh, I'm not showing that movie to my kids because that movie is sexist, and having no further examination of the themes than acknowledging that the theme is actually about Triton as a parent and how he fucks up. Like, Ariel's not the one that learns the lesson, he does. And that would mean in real life, your kids aren't the ones that need to learn the lesson, you do. So on that cheerful note, we are coming back to the course, which is terrifying.
Come on, you poor unfortunate soul! Go ahead, make your choice.
We have all the threatening elements that we have talked about throughout this video, especially with the trumpet sounding off in the strings.
I'm a very busy woman and I haven't got all day. It won't cost much, just your voice.
Before, the brass and the strings were menacing, but they were sort of like a warning sign to the audience. They were a little subtle. They were like in the background type scary. Like now, like this is blatant to the audience type scary.
You poor unfortunate soul. It's sad, but true.
And I love how the strings change and build during this section.
If you want to cross a bridge, my sweet, you've got to pay the toll. Take a gulp and take a breath and go ahead and sign the scroll.
Because they're quieter, they're more tense. Most of the other instruments have fallen away, but then the tension builds upward again.
Flotsam jetsam, now I've got her, boys. The boss is on a roll. This poor unfortunate soul.
To talk about the visuals, I love everything about this scene, like how Ariel and Ursula are cast in this sad blue light before we have this golden light. It's a great way to showcase how sad Ariel is because of everything in her grotto being destroyed and also the relationship with her father being destroyed. And that sadness is contrasted by the contract like shimmering in this golden ray of hope. But what's so crazy to me is that if you noticed, in the grotto scene, they are bathed in this golden light, but in that case, it's destructive. And so at first you have this contrast between like Triton's golden destructive magic and then the contract being hope. But that has a double meaning because Ursula's magic is also destructive as well. So it's the same as Triton. We may not realize that now, but we can realize that in hindsight. And what's so satisfying is that all these big dramatic animation moments are perfectly synced up with these reactions, like how Ariel takes the pen and then signs the contract. Like, it's perfectly synced with the music, and it feels like such a strong act of defiance because of that. It's not like Ariel has this like frown of resignation. She's not like, woe is me, I must sign the contract. She's like, you know what? Ursula's right. Fuck my dad, I'm doing this. You'll notice in this section we have less satisfying sounds, but that's because Ursula is not being manipulative anymore. She's just straight up annoyed and fed up now. Up here we do have won't cost, while down here we have things like want cross, and then of course we have bridge, breath, sweet, sign, scroll, go, gulp, and there's a middle thing-ish with breath ahead, though it's like very, very subtle. That probably has to do with how we stress the word compared to anything else, but it's really nice. I really love the rhyme of choice and voice because you know that it's coming as soon as you hear choice, but it's also the choice to give up her voice. And now I love this. I love when a course changes the lyrics slightly, right? Like instead of those poor unfortunate souls, it's like it's now you poor unfortunate soul. I feel like songs just don't do that enough anymore. Am I crazy? But I feel like that songs used to change the course a lot more, and now it's just like copy and paste and they're the same. And then we also have this fantastic momentum building set of rhymes with toll, scroll, roll, and soul. And this is a great way to conclude the song. And I love bosses on a roll because roll is one of those words that it's not like automatopoeia, but like it just sounds as what it is, right? And so when we say roll, we imagine something rolling. The word rolls in of itself. But even before this, we have this sort of chugga with, if you want to cross a bridge, my sweet, you've got to pay the toll. Take a gulp and take a breath and go ahead inside the scroll. We have this great build. We have this great momentum. And obviously the song doesn't like end there. Like it mostly ends in terms of our lyrics, but then we also have the spell, and that is the end of the invitation, the seduction, and the spell. It's the spell. Ariel has been seduced into the deal. And in terms of visuals, this is just so fantastic because our sad blue comes back, reinforcing that maybe Ariel made the wrong decision, right? And Ariel being cast in blue will come back later when they fight Ursula, of course. But then her magic turns from that blue to that evil green that we have associated with Disney villains since the classic trio, since the dawn of time, really, right? And that's a great contrast to Ursula's purple, but it's also like a reveal in the sense. This entire time, we have been waiting for that to happen, like that iconic green evil magic color. And we've gotten a lot of other colors, but now it's like, okay, mask off for Ursula. She gets to reveal that she's evil now. Our gold comes back when Ariel is transformed, and then Ursula laughs maniacally, and it does feel like for a moment, yes, Ariel is basking in gold, as I explained earlier with the foreshadowing and everything, but it seems more like Ursula is the one that is basked in gold because she won, and that's a contrast to the contract scene earlier as well. Isn't that so interesting? Because we've talked about gold having this weird double-edged sword, right? Like it can represent magic, but then it can also represent destruction, and so what you could see happening is that Ursula got what she wanted, Ariel got what she wanted, but Ariel will pay for it later, so that's the destructive element of the gold, or the fact that, you know, it took her voice away and also her fins away and all of that stuff. And then for Ursula, it's that even though she has won right now, this choice will lead to Ursula's destruction later on. And so just like earlier, I said that Triton's destruction, right, like that basks Ariel in gold, but then it's a bad thing, whereas in this song with Ursula, it's a good thing. But it actually has a double meaning. Like, it's not just a good thing, it's a good thing now, it's a bad thing later. And I love this being a mask-off moment for Ursula, because really, like, what is Ariel gonna do? Like, even if she hears this little aside to Flotsam and Jetsam, it doesn't matter. And I think what is so compelling is that Ariel wants to do this regardless of whether or not Ursula is evil. It's not like all of the doubt that Ariel feels is erased. It's that Ursula isn't entirely wrong about what she says when it comes to Ariel getting what she wants. If Ariel really wants this, there is no other way. So whether Ursula has convinced Ariel that she is actually good or not is really, like, irrelevant. Like, what's more important is that there is no other way to become human. Triton isn't gonna do it for her. And here's something that is, like, insane, and I think that this will blow some of your minds, though I hope by now, you know, you guys think that everything that I'm saying is smart, because this is pretty far in the video for you to be like, I don't know, right? I don't know if Cal has said anything smart yet, right? But here is something like the icing on the cake, okay? What does crossing a bridge take? Legs! If Ariel wants to cross the bridge, not only the metaphorical bridge between the two worlds, but she actually wants to literally be able to cross a bridge to go on land, she has to pay the toll. It's just so smart. Like, they were insane for this. Oh my god. And I hope that you have found every neurotic observation valuable. But what is the key lesson that I think everyone needs to hear for this week? What is the lesson about writing villains that Disney themselves has forgotten? Characters like Ursula are entertaining, and their musical numbers make them even more hypnotizing to watch. But why do we keep begging Disney for more villains? Like, is it just so we get more songs like this? Why is enough never enough? And before I reveal that, I just want to thank all my patrons and my YouTube membership members for supporting me. If you want to watch my videos early while being able to enable me to make high-quality content about the niche topics that we all love every single week, please consider joining them. I also have video commissions open if you want me to talk for this long about your hyperfixation, and you can pay me to discuss any song or anything really that you want. And I also have songwriting consulting commissions open if you want my advice and feedback on your music that is even more detailed than what you have seen here. But let's get back to Ursula. The Villain Bible has a key concept in terms of writing the villains that modern Disney seems to have forgotten. And everything I'm gonna talk about contributes to this one thing. They talk about how striking it is to see Ariel so lonely and so innocent and so desperate that she will trust Flotsam and Jetsam and then Ursula herself, despite the fact that she would not usually associate with these scoundrels. Ariel has already been betrayed by her own father, and so instead of being annoyed at Ariel for making the choices that she makes, we are sympathetic because we have also felt driven away or ostracized in our own lives. But what does this contribute to, and why is it so important? Because in the Bible, the writers point out that Ariel's warmth is contrasted perfectly with Ursula's darkness, and that is what facilitates the victim and villain dynamic. The villain and the victim are built from each other, making both characters richer and stronger. The victims are forced into emotionally charged activities, while the viewers vicariously live through each disheartening torment, each moment of terror, each threatening thought. The plot is constructed so the victim is dangerously vulnerable and almost loses the struggle against a stronger adversary. And this is a great piece of writing advice. It makes the movie dramatic and it takes us on a journey for sure. But why do we care? You can't just copy and paste the hero's journey circle, you know what I mean? There has to be something more emotional to it. A very important part of this combination is the victim, whose character must be established just as strongly as the villain's. And how is that established? Disney would say, through warmth. Warmth is what makes us care. The audience must understand their problems, cheer for their efforts, and enjoy their successes. If there is no victim, there is no villainy, only threatening potential. But I'm going to take this a step further than the Bible did and give you guys my own lesson. In a musical, the characters are most strongly established by what? A song. Where are the characters most vulnerable? When they are singing their true feelings directly to the audience. Ariel has an I Want song that shares her heart and soul and her desires with us, and so Ursula must equally have a villain song that shows how opposed they are, not only morally and in this fight against good and evil, but within the music and the lyrics themselves. The song is what makes the biggest impact on the story, and so therefore, if you give a hero a song but then don't give the villain one, it can feel unequal, whereas instead we see Ursula and Ariel operating at equal measure through their own musical numbers. We must have a song where Ursula uses the vulnerability that music provides, that musical theater is supposed to have, as a weapon. And this weapon is stronger than any fight scene. The villain is key to your movie, and you have to have everyone else rise up to that same level. There must be a worthy adversary or you have no picture. And Ariel and Ursula's songs make them worthy musical adversaries. A weak villain seldom calls for the creation of a first-class hero. If the story does not make convincing use of the villains, there is no real menace and there is no heart. Conversely, a hero or heroine who is passive or timid or too terrified to talk does nothing to help us understand the aggressor who wants to get rid of these meddling little fools. But victims who are clever, combative, unbending, force the villains to disclose deeper behavior patterns and inner feelings. And how is this expressed? By the light a character has that forces the villain out of the shadows and to reveal themselves to us. Ariel's song has all the whimsy and innocence of a mermaid dreaming under the sea, while Ursula's song screams that she is evil and a witch, and maybe even less innocent. Again, more jaded. She's not naive like Ariel. It is that innocence contrasted with the darkness that makes the movie so much more memorable. And this is what will leave an emotional impact on the audience. It's the same reason why Belle is contrasted to Gaston, or Quasimodo is contrasted very directly with Heaven's Light versus Frollo's Hellfire, and why Jafar uses Aladdin's own song against him. We are introduced to the light of the hero, and then we see how the shadows only grow larger because of it. In a musical, important details are not left behind in the script. They are conveyed through song, and they imprint an emotion on us. And by giving a villain a song, you give us a memorable, emotional imprint of them and their darkness. If the victim is a sympathetic and appealing character, the audience becomes more involved. As the villain becomes more overpowering, the victim struggles frantically, searching for a major response in order to save himself. It is what the villain forces others in the cast to do that will make a story memorable rather than merely ordinary. And this song is the turning point that the audience will never forget. This song is the clash that brings us into the struggle and the push and pull between good and evil. We have the tension of the choice that Ariel will make, all while knowing in the back of our minds that her making that choice is what? Inevitable. So we let ourselves be entertained by Ursula and entertained by finding out how the inevitable outcome happens, even if we know that it's going to. Ursula has overpowered Ariel, and yet the story is not over. So we get to see Ursula at her most villainous that she can be in this moment, and while Ariel lost the battle, we also know that she hasn't lost the war. There will be another chance for Ariel to prove herself and fight back, and because of how wicked we see Ursula be in this song, how we see her prey on Ariel's insecurities and loneliness, we want Ariel to best her even more. If you take anything away from this video, and I mean anything at all, please take this. It is not about getting Eric anymore. That is not what the story is about. It is about beating Ursula. Getting Eric to break the curse is how Ariel will win, but it is about persevering over the most ultimate evil. And this is what stands out to me the most. Such attacks compel the heroes to become more heroic than most people have a chance to be in their whole lifetime. This captures the audience with hopes for their success, intense involvement in the outcome, and sympathy for the pain endured. Often it is followed by tears at the beauty of the victory, which leaves a warm glow in their hearts forever. Warmth is the hallmark of Disney films. Warmth in personality, in relationships, and in story construction. They say that every film that has continued to be successful has been carefully built around the potential for warmth in the basic concept. And we can see this in everything from the lighting to the environment to the outfits that the characters wear. And of course, in the music. Where there is warmth, there is inevitable darkness. The Little Mermaid was the first movie that really dug into the concept of warmth and darkness musically and elevated that concept to this level. Music impacts us on a subconscious level, and through the music, we get the warmth and darkness distilled in the quickest way, but also the most emotional way, like to the point where we're not even aware that the music is making us feel this way. We are just feeling it. So when I talk about what Disney has forgotten, it is not only the idea of warmth in their modern movies, but it's how music created a warmth that we could take with us wherever we go. A song is like having a little bit of that Disney pixie dust in our pocket to listen to whenever we want, whenever we need to, versus having to throw on the entire movie to get that feeling. It is a portable warmth. And even though Wish is obviously lacking in warmth, you may be thinking, but Cal, Frozen and Moana and Frozen 2, like they all have warmth. And like, you're right, but I think that what they are lacking is darkness. By having twist villains or refusing to have any villains at all, we lose out on that personification of darkness and pure evil. There are times like in Kanto where not having a villain does work, and we get that darkness in other ways. But in terms of a fairy tale, villains are necessary for the wish fulfillment element. If your story is about generational trauma, that's different. But the Disney animators believed that for stories about good and evil, the good and the evil must be represented there in the form of a villain and the underdog hero. It's the idea that the underdog, the lowly peasant, like ourselves, quite frankly, could defeat whatever evil is in our lives. And if you want to have a story that is character versus other self conflict, that's fine, but you still need to go to the intensity of that darkness, or the light just does not feel as earned. In Frozen, Moana, Frozen 2, and Wish, there is a lack of intensity. And if there is no darkness, the light cannot burn brighter. And some of you may also be saying, like, Cal, Frozen was this huge big thing, by the way, so I want to add this as a little footnote. Yes, it was. Let It Go was. And what did Let It Go do? In that one song, it conveyed Elsa's darkness contrasted with her light. That's why it works so well. It bottles up the emotions in a way that can be given back to us and that we can feel whenever we listen to that song. But it's just with how Disney has been going lately, like since then, that now like the warning signs are coming in. Frozen and how they changed Elsa's character a lot during production was the start of zapping a little darkness, like with having Hans, right? But Wish is like the worst offender in terms of how we have ended up where we are now. So instead of having these two extremes that pull extreme emotions out of us, it's just sort of like, like, I don't know, maybe these movies do scare some 3-year-olds, but I wonder if any adults were genuinely haunted and terrified by anything other than the prospect of their kids playing the same songs over and over again. It's not the same. That's why the old Disney movies hit different. The fear makes us emotional and afraid for the character despite knowing that there will be a happy ending. As the animators described, they wanted us to feel warmth and darkness. It's just too bad that Disney forgot that the most memorable and marketable way to bottle up those emotions and sell them back to us, to have us come back to the movies for generations, was through having a musical number that could exist outside of the music's context but still make all those feelings come flooding back. It's hearing those songs and being nostalgic for the feelings that they gave you that make us go out and either engage with new Disney content or return to the old Disney content. If you want to hear about another movie that could have used some more darkness though, you should check out my video about Yzma's cut song from the Kingdom of the Sun, aka The Emperor's New Groove. By cutting this song, they took away a lot of Yzma's threatening potential in my opinion, and made the movie worse. And so that's another case study into why villain songs are so important. She literally held everything together, and so if you liked this video, you'll probably like that one. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and I hope that you care too. I will see you next time. Bye!